Alright, so hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. As always, our check-in link is on the board as well as in the Discord. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our brass representative, Collin Landry.
Hello, friends. Thank you, Dan. So today we're going to talk about brass maintenance. For those of you who don't know who I am, which I'm pretty sure all of you do, I'm Collin. I'm a tuba player here at CSUN. I'm a music ed major.
Collin Robinson?
Huh?
Collin Robinson? What were you in the shout
So basically, I've had over a decade of experience playing brass in the public school system. I've taught 3 years of brass. So I've practically seen almost everything you're going to see when you start teaching. As most brass players probably have when teaching and playing. So we're going to go over a couple things first. We're going to go over just standard prevention of brass maintenance. So the biggest thing, especially with the brass instrument, we have valves, right? And you know this is just for the standard piston valve. You're going to want to make sure your students are curling their fingers up and pushing them straight down, because if you have them pushing it like this, what will happen is inside of the casing, the valve will start to push against the casing, and then it'll either warp the casing or it'll start to warp the actual valve. And then if that happens, then, well, good luck. You're going to have to take it to a shop. Another thing is just having a clean mouthpiece. The whole thing with just like, you know, standard instrument procedure, wash out your mouth before you actually start playing. And just having a clean mouthpiece all the time will help with all the debris that's stuck in the mouthpiece from getting inside of the horn. You don't want to get any mold inside of your horn. That's not fun. And then your students are going to breathe that in and their lungs are going to be damaged. So some good things to do, you could use soap. I use soap when I clean my mouthpieces. I've heard some people use toothpaste, which is very interesting. And you should always have a mouthpiece brush when you're cleaning the mouthpieces, which we'll go over in a little bit. Like I said, rinse your mouth out or brush your teeth after eating before you play. I always like to brush my teeth if I have a toothbrush on hand. I had a friend in high school who would literally carry a toothbrush and toothpaste in her backpack, and every single time she ate, she would go to the bathroom and brush her teeth. I'm pretty sure she has enamel issues now, but that's okay. Never let your students hit their mouthpiece when it's inside the horn. This is more geared towards like your students are going to get bored, and then they're going to be like, okay, what's some fun thing to do while I'm just sitting here? And be like, or if they're in marching band and like they're like, oh, I don't want my mouthpiece to shoot back into my mouth when I snap up my horn, they'll be like. What happens is because of the way the mouthpiece is actually shaped, what will happen is that there's a vacuum seal that will create and you can't get the mouthpiece out, which is no fun for anyone. When we go over mouthpieces more in depth, I'll tell you how to take a mouthpiece out properly. And just like a little thing, like if your students are just like afraid that their mouthpiece is gonna fall out, literally just insert and twist is the way I always do it. And usually if you just insert twist until it doesn't twist anymore, and not very hard, just very light twist, it'll stay in the horn. Always have your students let you know when their mouthpiece gets stuck. This is not very preventative, but it will stop anything that will further happen to damage the horn. Because what will happen is your student will get their mouthpiece stuck, and then they'll be like, okay, I'm not going to say anything because I feel like I'm going to get in trouble. And then take their mouthpiece home, and then take it to like their dad or someone, and then their dad's going to look at it and be like, I think I got this. Take out some pliers and try and like twist it out and do anything with it that will damage the horn, that will damage the mouthpiece, and then they're gonna have to take it into a shop. I've seen it happen before. It's not fun. The parents were not very happy that it happened, and I'm like, I can't tell. I don't know what to tell you. You've got to take it in. And when bathing the instruments, unless you know how to take apart a valve properly, do not bathe the valves. Because there are felts on the valves that will get moldy if you soak them in water, because they don't ever dry properly. So just do not bathe the valves unless you know how to properly take apart the valve. So let's talk more in depth about the mouthpiece. As you can see here, mouthpieces dent. Mouthpieces dent very easily. Just a little drop on the ground from even a foot off the ground could cause a mouthpiece to dent. Now, of course, mouthpiece dents will inevitably affect the sound. So there's a nice little tool here. It's called a shank dent tool. It's like, I've seen them go from like $20 to $50, but like $20 is a cheap one, and the cheap ones are so good. All you do is you take the tool, you insert it in the mouthpiece, and you just twist it until the dent gets out. Not too hard so that it gets stuck. I've seen that happen too. But just enough so it gets out, so the dent gets out. That's definitely you should probably have it in your band room if you want it. You don't have to have it, but it's definitely a tool that will help you because your students are going to drop their mouthpieces all over the place. A mouthpiece puller. You have to have a mouthpiece puller. Have to. I've seen them range from $50 to $60. I've seen them range to $100. $50 to $60 will do just fine. This one right here, that's a fine one. That's a fine one. You can literally look them up anywhere and you'll find them. So you want to have this in your office. If you have a toolkit, you want to have it in the toolkit. I would suggest having two if you can, especially if you're a marching band or if you're a high school director with a marching band. You can have one in the band room and then possibly have one on you when you get to the field. Mouthpiece spray. This is mouthpiece spray. It's cleaning spray. You can use Bach. I like to use Bach. You don't have to have it. It's not required. It's just like a kind of easy, like, oh, I don't have time to clean out a mouthpiece, and one of my students doesn't have his mouthpiece. And just, yes.
Is there a difference between like that or like a specific brass mouthpiece spray versus a general like like green like spray disinfectant that most bands
No, not really at all. It's all really just disinfectant, but that's just a name brand, honestly, and it just says mouthpiece spray on it. If you just get a normal disinfectant, you're always gonna just want to spray it, wipe it down, and then maybe rinse it underwater, just like a tiny bit. But you genuinely do not need that, because just some soap and water and then just like wiping it down and everything will do just fine. A mouthpiece brush. Now, having a brush for mouthpieces is very, very important. That's how you get into the shank. That's how you clean the shank. You can clean the cup more thoroughly. Always have a brush. Brushes can go from, I bought a brush from $4 to like $12. And $12 are like the nice ones. And so I hope the picture's big enough to see. There's a little black rubber tip at the end of the brush here. You want to make sure that your mouthpiece brush has that on there. Because if you don't have the rubber tip on the mouthpiece brush, you're going to scratch up the mouthpiece. Because unless you know exactly where that tip is going, you're going to scratch it up. So you want to buy one that has the tip. Cool. Any questions on? Yes.
Going back to like the dent mouthpiece and stuff, like that little long part.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen where like an instance where that tool wouldn't help it? Like maybe.
The only time I've never personally seen it, but the only time I can ever think about it is if the mouthpiece is so dented, like if you were to get a pair of pliers and literally squeeze the end of the shank together, it probably won't work there, but you can also probably like try and pry it open to the point where it would work fine. But honestly, if their mouthpiece is at that point, just get them a new mouthpiece if you have the money for it.
So like, how would you be able to tell where like, okay, this mouthpiece has been through so much, I should just toss it? Like, at what point would you be able to tell?
So basically, all mouthpieces, they're going to be good. I mean, for for a long, long time. I mean, you can put it through the ringer, you can use that tool as much as you want, it'll be fine. But the time I would say to replace a mouthpiece is if the end cracks at all. If the end starts cracking at all, replace the mouthpiece. Or if the mouthpiece looks like it's breaking at all, replace the mouthpiece. Now, of course, you're gonna have like scratches on the rim and stuff like that. That's fine, that's all fine, but really it's the end of the shank there that starts cracking that I would just replace the mouthpiece. Yes?
You're forgetting when the plating comes off and then there's brass exposed.
Yeah, I would say you could if you wanted to. If it's just on the cup, on the outside of the cup, I wouldn't say that you need to really.
I was at the NAfME clinic. One of them, he says a lot of kids are developing a brass allergy.
Yeah.
So if it's in the cup now, it's just better to toss it.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. If it's starting to come off and you don't want to risk that, and I would just toss it.
He
So,
says it's just more of a liability.
yeah, exactly. You don't want to be liable for anyone getting an allergic reaction. Heaven forbid they have anaphylactic shock or anything. So yeah. Any other questions before we move on? Cool. Valves. So this slide is mainly for piston valves. We will get to rotary valves later. So there are many different types or different brands of valve oil. The three that I like are Yamaha, Hetman, and Blue Juice. What happened? You don't like Blue Juice anymore?
No, stay away from blue juice, it stains the valves over time.
Jordan used to be a very big Blue Juice user.
Does it stain blue?
No, it doesn't stain it blue.
Oh.
I would say, okay, this is what I say. If you're just like scrambling to get to like find any valve oil, you can use Blue Juice. But I use Yamaha synthetic. Yamaha synthetic I think is the best. But this is like a can of worms I don't want to open because this is a massive debate among brass players. Valve oil is valve oil, in all honesty. However, there are some brands that say valve/slide oil or valve/slide/key oil. I would stay away from all of those because the thing with the oil in these, it's not like you can just get your standard extra virgin olive oil from your house and be like, okay, let me put this on a valve and it'll start working. There's chemical components in these valve oils that are specifically for the valves, which is why if you use Yamaha synthetic, there are 4 different types of Yamaha synthetic valve oils. There's Yamaha synthetic light, Yamaha synthetic regular, Yamaha synthetic heavy, and Yamaha synthetic vintage. Yamaha synthetic light you'd use for your like trumpets. If Yamaha regular you'd use for like your baritone euphoniums. Heavy you would use for tubas, and vintage you would only use for vintage horns. Do not worry about vintage unless your trumpet student player comes in with some old Bach horn. That but most, I would say that, for your beginning band, don't worry about the viscosity of the valve oil. Even for your program, regular valve oil will do just fine. Yeah, regular or light will do just fine. If you have students who want to pursue a career in music, I would say then you start to talk to them about viscosity. Like for me, for tuba, I'm using regular, but I'm starting to get into using heavy because my valves are heavy. It's literally based on how easy it is to press the valves, is what valve oil you use. Cross-contamination. This is a very important one. If you have a student who uses Yamaha synthetic and forgets their valve oil, do not let them use like Hetman or Blue Juice. Because every single company, it's starting to become more recently, it's starting to become just like standard, like this is valve oil sort of thing. But like, you still don't want to mix companies because there will be some sort of minor chemical difference within the valve oil that will cause them to not want to work together, and then the valve starts to get stuck or slow. So which leads us to cleaning. Every single time you want to use a different valve oil on your horn, you need to clean the valves. Whether that be wiping it down, whether you take it apart and try and wash it, but once again, do not bathe the valves unless you know how to take it apart, because there are so many components to valves. Trumpet valves are the worst. I hate trumpet valves so much. If a student takes a trumpet valve apart, I wish you good luck trying to get it back together. It is not that easy to do. What will happen is, so trumpet valves, some trumpets have the spring within the valve, the valves themselves. And they're going to take it apart, the spring comes out, and then the valve guide comes out, and then they're like, what the heck do I do with this? I don't know what to do. And you're looking at this and you're like, oh my gosh, there are like 12 million pieces right in front of me. How do I put them back together? Don't, just don't. Just don't worry about it. Now, there are some things that you do have to think about when cleaning though. In your standard valve, euphonium, tuba, some trumpets, it depends on the trumpet. The spring is outside the valve, it'll be under the valve, and so you'll have the valve, the little button part, you'll have the stem, and then you'll have the valve itself with some felts on it, and then you have a little white piece on the top called a valve guide. Do you have one of your trumpets on you?
I have all my trumpets on me.
Is one of them like that, or are they all,
My flugel has box strings.
okay.
That's common with flugels.
Yeah, it's more common with flugels than trumpets. And student model trumpets, a lot of them will have the valves I'm talking about. So while Jordan is getting their flugel horn, what you're going to want to look for is a valve guide. There are, on the top of the valves are going to be two holes. There's going to be a big hole and a small hole. Now, with the valve guide, it goes into a very specific hole. If it gets out of place, if it goes into the wrong hole, or the valve guide just gets out of place in general, man, thank you so much.
So, if my trumpet has springs inside the valve,
And then the flugel
yeah, just read about that.
has a spring outside the valve.
So it's loose, just in the casing.
These are oiled really nicely.
Thank you. It's not blue juice, it's none of that.
Yeah.
It clicks. It's a sensible one.
So basically, if that valve guide gets out of place, you will most likely not be able to play the horn. Now it's very easy to get it back into place. You just have to move the valve guide over, and it'll be absolutely fine. Now, something that you will definitely see with your, especially beginning band students who don't know what they're doing when they're taking the horn apart, is you will see them, is they'll be like, Mr. Landry, when I press down my second valve, it won't play. And the most common thing that would have happened in that situation is they took every single one of their valves out when they were oiling their valves, and then put it in a different casing. The valves have holes in them that are very specific to these slides that go with the valve casing. So if you put the third valve, say, in the second valve casing, and the first valve, etc., and you push the valve down, it ain't gonna play. Even in some cases, it won't even play when you just have it open. Most likely it won't. Most likely it will, but sometimes it won't. So if that ever happens, there's always numbers on the valves. Every instrument I have seen has numbers on the valves, either on top of the valves or on the actual valve itself, and that'll tell you exactly which casing to put it in. When you clean the valves, you wipe it down. You make sure to wipe down the casing as well, because the debris from the valves will get on the casing, and if you just wipe down the valves, there's still going to be debris in it, right? I would suggest using a microfiber towel or using a paper towel that does not leave off a lot of lint, because lint is just more debris that's going to slow down the valve. So microfiber towels, cheap at Costco, waffle weave towels, cheap at Costco, they're all good. You want to make sure that when you're in the casing, you clean where the valve guide track, because debris will get caught in that track. And then also you want to make sure you clean inside the actual valve holes, because there will also be debris in there. It doesn't matter how often you wash your mouth or you clean your mouth, stuff will get in your horn. It's just, it's normal. But once again, cleaning your mouth, washing your mouth out, before you play, it's just a preventative tactic to stop that from happening very often. Now, specifically with valve guides, they can wear down. Like my 4th valve on my tuba, I can twist it a little bit with the valve guide because it's so worn down. I need to order more. That's not necessarily an issue until the point where it gets so worn down the slide can actually twist within the casing. I've seen it happen before. It's not fun. The student has no idea what the heck is going on, and then you're like, okay, let me look at the horn, and you're like, okay, it's fine, it's the right valve, and then you twist it around in the casing. It's like, oh, the valve guide doesn't actually work. And then you're gonna have to order new valve guides, and valve guides, they rarely come individually anymore. Most of the time they come in the set of how many valves the horn has. I haven't seen it come individually before, so you're gonna have to pay for an entire new set of valve guides, which is good because for most instruments, if you have the same brand, the valve guides are interchangeable, so you'll have extra. Does anybody have questions about valves? Cool, moving on. Rotary valves. This is an entirely different beast in itself. It is very similar to the valve, but also very, very different. Now, so you have rotor oil. This is Hetman rotor oil. This is a rotor oil I use. It's wonderful rotor oil. As you can see, there's a needle on the rotor oil to get within the rotor itself. So when you're oiling your rotary valves, you can't really see it very well, but this screw right here, can everyone see where that screw is? That part actually protrudes out, and it's not just flat. So there's a little space between the valve and where that screw is, and the little mechanism where you can get that needle inside and oil the rotor itself. You can open up the slide and put some normal valve oil in it and start moving it around. That will work temporarily. You want to do this too. Always do this. You can do that mechanism as well. It doesn't really do anything. It's just kind of like peace of mind sort of thing, but always do that. There are some points where it might not be the valve itself because there are mechanisms on those rotary valves. I don't know if you can see them very well. There's some stems that connect the rotary valves here. And then there are like screws and everything, and like bearings and joints and everything. You want to get linkage or joint oil as well to oil those things. It'll stop the clicking sound. It'll make the valves faster. It'll just be good. So I would suggest rotor oil and just your standard linkage or joint oil. Any questions on rotary valves? These are for French horn. If you have any tubas that are rotary tubas, any trumpets that are rotary trumpets, I mean, please do not suggest that, or don't buy rotary trumpets, please. But if your student ever comes to you and is like, hey, I have a rotary trumpet, it's like, okay, cool, now you know how to maintain it. Slides. Now, there is a very common misconception with non-brass players that slide grease is slide grease. No. Slide grease is not just slide grease. There are different types of slide grease. You have your tuning slide grease, and then you have your trombone slide grease, which is mainly called trombone slide lubricant, but some people are like, oh, I can just use slide grease on this. No. Which is why I put on here, do not use trombone slide grease. That is a completely different thing. It will not work on your slides. Your slides will get stuck. The viscosity of both are extremely different. Now you want to make sure that you keep your slides greased. You know, I've seen countless and countless times of where students do not grease their slides, they don't clean their slides, and then it gets stuck, and then you have to call on a repair guy and be like, hey, can you unstick these slides? Sometimes the slides get frozen, which means that they literally have to get a blowtorch to melt off all the debris that has gotten stuck on there. and expand the metal. Some good brands, I use Super Slick personally. It's worked very, very well for me. There's Yamaha slide grease, and then there's Bach. Yes, tuning slide grease comes in a bottle like valve oil sometimes, which not a lot of people actually know, but it's good. Now, be very, very careful. I see you all smiling. Be very, very careful with this, because if you have that Bach tuning slide grease right there, and then you have a nice bottle of blue juice, because those bottles are very similar. You have a nice bottle of blue juice valve oil. Some kid will come up to your slide grease and go, let me put this on my valves, or be like, oh, let me put this blue juice on my slides. Label it, or don't get one of those two. Label it. If you get that slide grease, label it. Before you grease your slides, you always want to wipe them down. Once again, I recommend using a microfiber towel or some towel that will not leave a lot of debris or any debris on it at all. The biggest thing with that is that, slides are one of the two things that you can take out of your horn that will have debris on it, some nasty gum, whatever your children or whatever your students decide to eat before they play their horn. So wipe it down. Do not put a lot of grease on it. Usually what I like to do is I just like to get a little bit of grease on it, put it at the end, and then just let it do its thing. Move it in and out, and it'll all be fine. Now, if you over grease the slide, it'll just be very, very slow. At first greasing, it'll be slow in general. But if you over grease it, it'll stay slow. If you've over greased it, you have to repeat the entire process again, and then it's just not fun. So just don't over grease the slide, just a little bit at the very edge of it, and then just move it around the casing, it'll be just fine. You can bathe slides. Now, there is something very, very, very specific about bathing slides. If you have a tuning slide that has a water key or spit valve, whatever you want to call it, and it has a cork pad, you should not be bathing that. If it has a synthetic pad, sure, why not? It doesn't really matter. But the cork will wear down, it'll break, and then you're going to have to get it replaced. I would always recommend having synthetic water key pads. Always synthetic. It lasts longer. It just lasts longer. It's more durable. So it works better. As you can see, there's a little brush here. We like to call that a snake. I'm sure a lot of you know what a snake is. It won't hiss at you. Don't be afraid of it. You can use that to clean out the slides and the guides. And the horn in general. If you decide to bait the horn, always use a slide. Make sure that you take the slides out, make sure you take the valves out and everything. I would highly recommend you have a snake in your band room. I would highly recommend it. In terms of greasing your slides, I always grease them when they start to feel slow. I know that there are some people who grease them every week, some people grease them once a month. I don't think you need to grease them every week. You can if you want to, but if it's starting to get slow, then I would definitely say you should re-grease them or wash them. Are there any questions about slides? Yes?
You're not going to mention the Bill Watrous technique?
No, I'm not going to mention the Bill Watrous technique.
Well, now I want to know.
Yeah, I do.
I haven't heard that technique in a long time. Danny, remind everybody what the Bill Watrous technique is. I forget.
Okay, Bill Watrous, he was a jazz trombonist. He's been dead for 4 years, I think. He has the Little Prince haircut, like the dome. He has it's a 10-20 minute video actually. I do a different version when I play trombone. There's actually a cleaning rod, and you're supposed to do this every month. You put a fellow who would just get a towel, and then they wrap the cleaning rod with it, or a t-shirt actually, and then you're supposed to really clean it out in a circle till the slide warms up a little bit within your hand. So it's creating that friction, because in his theory is it's cleaning out all the debris that a snake wouldn't. That's history. Does it work? Yes. Does it take like 10 minutes to do each slide? Yes. But I mean, I've done it when I played trombone, and it kind of does actually work.
I would suggest, if you have the space for the instrument and you have a bathtub, just using lukewarm water, that will work so much faster. It will definitely, I would take a bathtub with lukewarm water, taking 2 minutes for all that stuff to like just like soak in everything, over standing there for 10 minutes with this light in my hand. Just be like, okay, wait for this stuff to warm up. So.
Well, no, you're supposed to like really.
Well, you're supposed to, yeah.
It's a whole arm workout.
But generally, if you bathe it and you clean it when you're bathing it, it will get, I would say, 95% of the stuff out. There's just some stuff in there that just won't come out, and you can use that technique then if you would like to. Yes, Mom?
As in terms of bathing, is that like something you would suggest like a beginner middle schooler who doesn't have like a private teacher take on?
No.
Or like, okay.
No. I would say the students bathing their own horns, if you have a very advanced middle schooler who's done a lot of research, then they could do it, but that should really come in high school. And I started bathing my horns when I was in high school. Surprisingly, I had a big enough bathtub to fit a tuba. I did at one point have to do the whole flip method where you soak like half of it and then flip the tuba around for like the other half. That didn't work very well. Don't do that. If you really, let me say this. The band director should know how to bathe the horn. And all the steps that I've told you, take the valves out, don't bathe the valves until you've taken it all apart. Take the slides out, take all the caps off. Use lukewarm water. I would say that a band director who has done their research and who knows how to bathe the horn should absolutely be able to bathe all the horns that they have in their inventory. But if a kid wants to do it, if it's their personal horn, that's their discretion. You can't tell them what to do and what not to do with their personal horn unless it's going to like immediately cause harm to their horn. So. You can give them suggestions, but if they want to bathe their personal horn, by all means, they have the right to. If it's a school horn, I would suggest that they do not bathe it, unless you like walk them through how to do it, because that is the school's property, and in the end of the day, that is your liability. You had a follow-up question?
I was gonna say, in that case, if it's like you have like a beginning like brass student who like the issue is just that the horn needs a bath, and you just like, okay, just like leave it here tonight, and then like would you suggest like you just take it home, bathe it, and like give it back to okay.
Yeah, I would suggest that if you have enough instruments work to the point where you could get them another one while you're cleaning that horn out, that's also something you could do. But yeah, I would just say leave it here and then you take care of it and then give it back to them the next day. Just the stuff that you're gonna have to deal with after school as a band director. So, any other questions about bathing or anything about slides? Yes, Dane.
The CASMIC trip, the Aaron D. Moss, he's one of the repair technicians, like he's part of the union. He said that now the easiest thing you can do is get an ultrasonic cleaner, and there's a ratio on his website of, I think it's called Simple Green, and you can just stick 2 of them in there, and then he says it's so much more, it's easier.
Yeah, if you want to do that, you can. I trust Aaron. I trust Aaron with any of my horns. But if you want to do that, you can. If you have the money to do it, you can. I would definitely say that there is a point in which the horn gets so dirty you have to take it to a repair person or cleaner, to get it professionally cleaned if the valves are stuck where you can't get it out, or and you've exhausted all options to get it out, which we'll talk about in a second, the very worst case scenario of getting a slide out before you take it to a repairman. Or you're just like, this horn is just disgusting, and you don't want to have to deal with it. If you have the budget for it, I would definitely say get that specific horn or any horn that is like that cleaned professionally, because they will do a whole lot better than you could with a bathtub and soap and a brush. Now, this this is something that is mainly done in the marching band field with slides, because it's like the easiest, most accessible thing, because like a bunch of students or techs carry lanyards on them. I don't recommend this because it could damage the slide if you're not careful, but what you could do is get a lanyard, put it around the slide, and try and pull it out. Once again, I don't recommend this at all. I've seen it done, I've seen the slide be okay, but there are a couple things you also have to think about. When that happens, you have to pull it straight out, because if you try and pull it sideways, you could bend the slide or the slide casing. If you try and yank it out, it could warp the slide. I mean, that is like your worst case, I have nothing I can do right now scenario, and there's no way to get this water out. But if you have to do it, you have to do it. Justin, did you have a question?
Oh,
I
was just thinking about, a question popped into my head, like, how do you clean the rotary valves? Like, as in, like, how do you dry it? Because if you have to, like, stick the needle into it, like, how do you clean off?
So it's something, and we're going back to valve oil now, it's something to also be said that valve oil kind of doubles as a cleaner. Kind of doubles as a cleaner. It'll get like just the normal, it'll get like the bigger debris off. Don't go home and just like spray valve oil on it and think the valve is clean. That's not how that works. In terms of rotary valves, you have to take, to really clean the rotary valve, you have to basically take the entire mechanism apart. I don't ever suggest doing that, which is why I didn't mention it, but it is a good point. You have to take the mechanism apart to get it out, and you have to keep track and know how to take it apart and put it back together. I've never done that with a horn. If I need my rotary valve cleaned, I take it to a shop. Which is, you know, if you have rotary instruments, like you have a 4-valve rotary tuba, and the rotary valves need cleaning, I would just send it to a shop, honestly. I wouldn't even try and do that yourself, because there's so many little components inside of a rotary valve that it's just way too complicated. So send it to a shop. That's what I would say. Are there any questions about that? Or any other questions about slides before we move on to the trombone slide? Wonderful. The trombone. This is my favorite thing in the world. I would have this in your band room. This is Yamaha trombone slide lubricant. You will go around this college, and I can bet you at least one trombonist has this. I will bet you at least 5 trombonists have this. I will bet, yes. I'm not going to bet all do, because that's just a bet I'm not willing to take. But I would say a lot of trombonists have this on them. This is something you should definitely invest in. It is not that expensive. It's probably around $6 to $12 a bottle, which is like kind of expensive if you think about it, but like what you get out of it is worth it. Super sick trombone slide cream, it works too. It's like, you put it on there and then you just move the slide around. Same with this. So the biggest thing about the trombone slide is that there are a lot of, it's for any of you who have taken brass methods, you have heard Whitehair say this, and it is definitely true. It is extremely delicate. The metal on the slide is very, very easily dented. And if you get a dent in your slide, it will get to the point where the slide, it could get to the point where the slide's no longer functional. Or if there's a bend in the track or anything. So you want to make sure that your trombone students are taking very, very good care of the trombone. No swinging it around, making sure that their stand is high enough so when they bring their trombone up, it's not going onto the stand. I mean, you see that a lot. Really just like make sure that if you, in your beginning bands, teach your trombonists how to properly hold the trombone, teach them how, like, what's good technique with the trombone and everything, and make sure they use the slide lock. Make sure they use the slide lock. I've seen so many times, you know, a kid's just standing there and he goes, okay, cool, I'm walking over this way on the concrete. And then now the slide's dented and everything. always have the meter that says the slide block. Now for actual maintenance itself, only use trombone slide lubricant or cream. Do not use tuning slide cream or grease. Once again, they're two completely different things, two completely different viscosities. It will not work. From what I remember, the tuning slide grease is a lot thicker than actual trombone cream. Wipe down the slide before, just standard stuff like that. It's very, very easy. I used a paper towel when I was in high school to do this. You can use a microfiber cloth if you want to. I would genuinely suggest a microfiber cloth because it'll get the stuff off. You have to basically treat it like the slide is a tuning slide when cleaning it in that sort of sense and wiping it down. Every single time you're going to reapply cream, you should wipe it down. Every single time. Now you'll see some trombonists, mainly those who are getting into like the more high school level or the more college level, professional level, they'll have a spray bottle. There is I should say this. There is a wonderful solution that you can have in that spray bottle. It is very easily accessible. All you gotta do is go to a sink and put some water in it. Because what happens is sometimes, and this will happen a lot because of the usage of the slide, the lubricant will start to dry out a little bit. All you need to do is just spray some water on it. Whenever you're moving, you have your slide, you don't need to always reapply more or new cream on it when you're trying to play it. If it starts to get just a little bit sticky, just spray it with some water. It'll reactivate it. If you think back to your high school chemistry class, what will happen is the two liquids will fight against each other, so it'll create a more slick surface. Like I said, it's very important that the slide does not get dented and bent. I'm saying that again because it is probably the most important thing with the trombone. Do not, I cannot stress this enough, do not let your trombones fight with them. Trombonists fight with them. You may think that is like a wild idea. I have seen it happen before. I have seen two kids who decided, hey, these things kind of look like swords, let's try and hit each other with them. I took the trombones away from them. Do not let them do that because that's just a mess waiting to happen. Are there any questions on the trombone? Now we're getting into dents. Now, generally small dents are going to be harmless. If they get big enough, they will affect the sound of the horn. It'll detune it and everything, and it just sucks. Now, I would call this a pretty small dent, depending on the instrument. For a trumpet, I call it like medium-sized-ish. It could do something to the sound, but probably not going to do anything to the sound. If this was on a tuba, I wouldn't even give it the light of day. I'd just be like, okay, that's there now. It's really all dependent on the instrument. In high school I had a tuba player take up my tuba up the bleachers for a football game, and he tripped, he fell, and then the next thing I knew, my bell had this massive dent in it. It didn't look like that, but it sure looked like that. Bell dents, once again, it's just all depending on the instrument. If you have a bell that's dented like that on a trumpet, that's probably going to do something, because that's completely just affecting the size of the hole of the bell. If it looks like that, that's not anything really to be worried about. It sucks, but oh well. There's nothing you can, There are ways that you can remove dents yourself within the actual piping, like this dent here. And if you can see here, there are metal balls, and you can get a very strong magnet and use that. I've used one before, it works. I would just say do your research before using it because it's a very, very strong magnet. And don't let your kids use it, your students use it at all, especially if they're very little. You don't want them to swallow that. That's bad. When you're using these dent removal balls, you want to make sure that you put it. It's going to go inside the ball's going to go inside the instrument. You're going to have the magnet on the outside, and you're just going to rub it against where the dent is, and they'll eventually get the dent out. Now you're going to want to put a towel over it. The magnet will be strong enough to go through for the magnetic force to go through the towel, because you don't want to scratch up the metal on the outside of the horn. If you think a dent is significant enough to an instrument, I would just take it to a shop and have them repair it themselves. That's what I would do. If you bell dents, if you think it's that, if you've got a bell that is warped literally like this, like bent in half, take it to a shop. Don't try and fix bell dents yourself. You're not going to do it. I've seen people try and do it with drumsticks. I've seen people try and pry it with their own hands. It either doesn't work or they just make it worse. Take it to a shop. A shop will have the proper tools to fix any dents you have. Are there any questions about dents? Wonderful. Now, are there any questions in general? No questions? Okay, I will say one thing. I did forget to say this with the valve portion of the slides. It is once again a massive thing amongst brass players. How often do you oil your valves? I know people who oil them once a day. I know people who oil them once a month. I wouldn't do either of those. It really just depends on usage. I would say for a beginning band, for a middle high school level band, once a week should be fine. Once a week to twice a week should be absolutely fine. You're not going to have a student who's using their valves enough to warrant oiling them every day, because that's literally like you're practicing for like 9-10 hours a day or playing somewhere within that too. So I would say a good number is 1 to 2 times a week is generally where you'll be safe. Yes?
Sorry, I just remembered. So, what do you think about teaching students to oil valves by like taking them out and oiling them that way versus like the like shorthand, like turn the horn upside down, put it through the like thing on the bottom, and then just like.
So that's a very good question. That's a very good question. You will have different people telling you different things. Some people will tell you that you can use the hole at the bottom of the valve to do it. I will like to say this, and I will go on record saying this. That doesn't work as effectively as people think it does. Because what needs to happen is that you need to get it around the valve, you needed to get around the valve casing. And just putting it in the hole, you're only really hitting the bottom of the valve with like maybe some seeping into the sides. Now, I will say for a beginning band, I wouldn't have them fully take the valve out. I would have them partially take it out and then put some valve oil on that and then move it around in the casing, and then that will work just fine. Now, once you start to get to more advanced players, they can take the valve out if they know what they're doing. Most of them will if they're more advanced. But I will always say you should always recommend to your students when they're taking valves out, take them out one at a time, oil them one at a time, don't all do it at once. Because that's where you start to get the issues of, crap, where does this go? Where does this go? Oh shoot, is this my first or second valve? Oiling valves one at a time is literally a savior in the classroom. So yeah, I personally wouldn't do it upside down like that. It's not the most effective way to oil a valve, I'll say that. Are there any other questions about anything in this presentation? Cool.
Well, thank thank you all again so much for coming. Next week we're having another clinic. Justin, do you wanna?
Yeah, so it'll be a clinic with, she's a director at Robert Frost Middle School. She's, her name is Miss Tina Curtis, and she's gonna come in, she's gonna talk about starting a percussion ensemble within middle school, like, or like public schools. Because she has created a very, very extensive percussion ensemble at her school. It's very inspiring, and I would like to hear what she has to say.
Alright, so everyone give it up again once again for calling our vice president.